Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole. I'm so happy to be with you today. I learned about this incredible guest just yesterday and said, I need to talk to her now. And why now? Because she has a book out that is launching today. And how rare is it to get to talk to the author on the day that the book is out? And it is so appropriate to what we've been talking about for months. We've been in this pandemic for going on 2 years. So many changes are occurring in all of our lives. And it means that it's often a time for a big change, not a small change, a big change. And so the author that I'm talking to today has spent so much time working with businesses to help them understand how you can survive and thrive even when tremendous challenges occur in the country, in the marketplace, in your particular industry. And she's written a book about it. So the book is called Turnaround: How to Change Course When Things Are Going South. It is written by Turnaround Mastermind CEO Lisa Gable. She has done so many incredible things. She has helped many, as I said, to survive the ongoing pandemic, and business owners and executives are seeking guidance for how to do this. She's offered it. Lisa Gable has served 4 presidential administrations as UN delegate and US ambassador. She's got a tremendous amount of both international and uh, United States, countrywide experience. And so we're going to talk to her right now about what turnaround can mean for you. So please welcome Lisa Gable.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing just great. Thank you so much for doing this today. It's an exciting day, and I really appreciate the new friends that I've made through this process.
Oh, wonderful. And congratulations on a book that is so timely. I've talked to so many people. I have a small business myself, whether it's small or large. Lisa, we know many businesses have not survived
Yep.
this incredibly unusual time that we've been in where the economy just took a nosedive for many, not all. But you talk in your book about it's not just the pandemic, there are all kinds of things that can create the need to relook at what you are doing to decide whether it's time for a turnaround. What are some of the things that you think are important for people to look at?
Well, what I want people to do, and the method that I describe in my book, has a 4-step process. I tell you to visualize the future. If you could wave your magic wand and you could have the perfect business situation or organizational situation, what would it be? And you keep that vision in your mind as you do an auditing process. And you break down the past and you review currently what you're doing. And many times what we'll discover is through that process is that we've allowed things to grow during good times in a manner that may not actually work for the sustainability of the organization. And during hard times, those things can become distractions. And so you want to audit everything. You want to look at what's my perfect vision, what's job one for me, what's my core competency, and you start getting rid of some things. You basically build a path from the present to the future. And that means using a decision tree, going through the process of evaluating, ranking, and rating all the activities that you're involved with. Got to look at the economics of the business. What is it costing me to do this? Not only from a financial standpoint, but from a people standpoint. What impact is it having on my people? What impact is it having on me personally? And then what is the core competency? What's that number one thing? If I can't do anything else to survive, what is that number one thing that I have to do? And once you identify what I call jobs 1, 2, and 3, the 3 most important things, let everything else go, then that gives you the ability to execute with speed, agility, confidence, and most importantly, heart. And I mention heart because life's difficult. And we're making decisions that impact other people. And you have to make the hardest decisions sometimes you've ever made in your life. But when you do that, remember that it's impacting another human being. And you may have a relationship with that person in the future. They may end up being one of your biggest partners. But what you need to do is understand that conversation and the decision you're making in the way in which you communicate it and recognize the impact it has on them.
So, Lisa, these are excellent points and strategies. And when people are in the midst of it,
Yeah.
it can seem so incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to separate themselves. If you feel like you're on a sinking ship, your arms are flailing, right?
Yeah.
And how do you get people to slow down, to step back and make that audit, that assessment when they may be in a panic?
They're in a panic, and I call it swirling and twirling.
Hmm.
It's just like you're swirling and you're twirling.
Yeah.
And so you really need to center yourself. And it's one reason why, again, I tell you to ground yourself in what do you want it to look like? What do you want it to look like? What's going to make the perfect scenario for you? What is going to accomplish your primary objective? And again, force yourself to say, if I can only do one thing, what's that one thing I've got to do? And that allows you to declutter your mind, have a moment of reflection, look objectively at some of the things you have been doing. Sometimes we get so passionately involved in something. Recently, someone asked me the question, is failure good for entrepreneurs, or what defines failure? And we can't stop talking about it as failure. Sometimes we put our hearts and souls into something, blood, sweat, and tears, and it doesn't work. Doesn't mean that
Mhm.
actually it may not work in the future, but it's not working right now. And so stop doing the self flagellation. Just
Mhm.
focus on what it is that you need to do. And then I have a team approach. Everything I have ever done, I've had a core team that I brainstorm with, that I problem solve with, that I work the problem with. You find a core group of people that you trust. If you don't have that individual or group of individuals within your organization, go to your mentor. In the turnaround that I recently did, my board chair and I had what I called the oh my God phone call at 5 o'clock every night, like clockwork, for the first month. And I got to call him and I could ask him direct questions, mentoring questions. How do I solve this problem? What do you think if I do it this way? And then I got to vent, because you do
Mhm.
need to vent. You don't want to do it in public. So
Sure.
we had the, oh my God, you won't believe what I discovered today. And we have an opportunity then to address it in the cone of silence and
Mhm.
work the problem in order to get an answer. And so tap into your mentors, tap into that core team, people that you trust, people that operate like you do, and make those hard decisions, but recognize and be willing to recognize the impact it's having on you and the impact it's having on other people, because it's hard. It's not easy.
And when you talk about the mentor and your core group, and I'm thinking of small businesses now, sometimes people don't even recognize if they have a
Yeah.
mentor, or other times their core group might be family members and friends who do not have expertise. They love them, but they may not know. So what advice can you give for folks when they may need to look beyond their core group if the core group really isn't competent to provide useful advice?
And recognizing that is so very important, because as you said, you love them dearly. Sometimes not-for-profits get started and they put all their family members on the board
Yes.
because the entire family is impacted by the disease. But that doesn't mean that it works well for making those hard decisions. A couple of things. One is, don't forget that your accountant can be your best friend.
Mm.
And so when I'm doing one in an organization, my CFO or the accountant is the person I always bring in, because everything is within business. It's about the numbers. It is
Yeah.
about the numbers. And the accountant may have a really drastic viewpoint that you don't share, but at least you're getting the input on the economic impact of those factors on the business. I think the other thing is that each of us are in communities, and what we forget is some people don't like to ask for help. It's okay to
Mm.
ask for help. People feel so honored when you ask them for help. So if you're in a church, a Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, if you're in a women's group, maybe you're in junior league, maybe you're in a sorority, whatever it is. And when I'm talking about a sorority, it could be a social sorority, or it could actually be a business sorority or fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the people who have the skill sets and the ability, and that you've read about, or they've solved that problem before. Take them out for coffee and be organized when you do. Have your list of questions. Don't waste their time. Walk through the questions with them. Take your notes. I do that in every situation.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this for a long time and I've had these lofty titles, but oh my gosh, I don't know everything. And I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
honest about it, and I don't pretend that I do. So I really sit down, but the key is using people's time wisely.
And Lisa, when you when you come before them, and again, this is a vulnerable moment. If
Yep.
you feel that your business project, whatever it might be, is sinking, is going under, you talk about the cone of silence, and people are often afraid. They're afraid to share what their truth is, what their vulnerabilities are, and also they may be embarrassed because they feel like a failure. So you mentioned stop thinking of it as a failure. Uh, how can you develop that courageous muscle to reveal what's truly going on?
Take a big breath, believe in yourself, and have the conversation. I am not going to tell you that everybody's going to be as nice as I'm going to be to you, or maybe Harriet's going to be to you. So you may have a conversation that's not as comfortable. You may discover that someone is not easy to have the conversation with. Okay, blow it off, have that conversation, go on to the next person. I have found though that people do, and I see this in women's business circles. Women are very, very good about opening up and I think having deeper conversations sometimes than men are. I think sometimes for men it's seen as a pride issue, or they are responsible or in their minds for delivering things at such a level, and so you need to move on from that. You do need to be able to have conversations with people, and the reality is sometimes people know you're struggling and they're waiting
Sure.
for you to ask. It's not in COVID. I think we are much more open in any downturn. I believe that we as individuals are recognizing everybody's having a hard time. It's not easy. And so even that bonding moment, because you may discover that they go, "Oh my God, I'm facing the same thing. I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but hey, I heard so and so may know the answer. Do you want to go with me to talk to them?" And all of a sudden, you're building an army. You're getting all sorts of
Mhm.
people invested in your success. And whether you're writing a book, and I feel like my whole team that I kept asking for questions and advice, I never knew how to write a book before. Be vulnerable. You do not need to know everything. You don't need to know everything. No one expects you to. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. If you're a doctor, you're not an engineer. If you're an MBA, you're not, the guy who knows how to fix the pipes. We don't know all the answers. And so accept that and just be willing to talk about it.
That's a really interesting point. I've read that there have been plenty of studies that point out that women often think that we have to know everything plus in order to ask a question, right?
Yep.
Very often men will just put it out there. I think that's a quality that we can uh, cultivate, that men often use. But I like your idea. Just go for it. Put it out there. When is it the right time to hire someone to come in to help? Because this is something you do. You go into
Yeah.
businesses and help them with the turnaround. Obviously, you need to be able to afford it, but how do you know when it's the right time to bring in outside help?
I'm going to be really honest with you. You've got to recognize if you're in a turnaround situation, you're going to have churn. And what I mean by that is you have to take the risk, you have to bring them in, but you protect yourself in the process. So don't get married right away. You got to date. And so one way that you date is through a 90-day contract. There's something that my sister taught me that I have used a lot during the last couple of years, and it's been wonderful for me and the individuals involved. Limited term employees. You can bring an individual on as a limited term employee that legally allows them to manage people within your organization, but they are not a full time employee, so you don't have the obligations. And it also gives both people the ability to assess whether or not they're the right fit, or they can walk away, and it doesn't have that same dynamic as if you brought somebody on full time and then boom, it didn't work, and 120 days later they're gone. So there are little tips and tricks that I talk about in the book that help you go through the dating process. And the other key thing I've learned, and this gets where the churn comes in a little bit, is different people are experts at different points in time in your turnaround. So if you're turning around a business, someone may be able to provide you with exactly what you need to fill a hole at this point in time.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean when you go to the next inflection point and you've grown a little bit, but you're still merging, that you don't need to find someone else. And so your level of transparency within those conversations, setting limits in advance, being transparent about the limits in advance, it
Mhm.
is a more relieving process for you, and the other individuals involved. And I believe in this dynamic that we have right now, that short term, fix this problem that's in front of me and then fix the next problem is going to be the trend in business. You're not going to find the perfect people that are going to be able to stay with you and fix all the dynamics of what you've got going on.
I think sometimes when the employees see someone has been brought in to help turn things around, they're on pins and needles. Is
Yep.
my job going to be on the line? You know, if there's going to be a big transformation, what happens to me? What happens to my family? And you mentioned at the beginning of this interview how it's so important to remember that you're dealing with people. What can employers do to help ease the worries that employees have?
Well, one thing with a small business, and I know that one of the challenges small businesses have, and I'm aware of a current situation I've been counseling someone about, is they don't have HR managers. I lean in my larger organizations, I lean very heavily on an HR manager because you need to understand the types of conversations you need to have with employees so that they know what's going on, they know how much they're going to get paid, they know how it's going to affect their job. There are different services that will provide you that HR manager for a period of time so you don't have to bring them on full time. If you're going through a lot, it's going to protect you because there
Mhm.
are EEO laws that you have to comply with. In COVID right now, there are so many mental health challenges that people are going through that you have an obligation to be extremely clear in your communication. If you change someone's job, write down what's changed and what their new role is. People need clarity, and providing them with that clarity is the most important thing. And have an open door. Be willing to talk and don't get irritated. We've all been through a lot, and turnarounds put you through a lot. People are allowed to be scared. People are allowed to lose it occasionally. It's okay. We can all get back together again, have had our moment, and just step forward. And it shouldn't impact the long-term relationship.
One of the things that we've all experienced during this period of quarantine because of COVID also is the that tipping point of racial justice, uh, really coming to terms with what racial justice means, and many corporations more than ever before decided to take action, put not just resources, but often internally when they have human resources departments and DE&I specialists to have them pay attention to what are we doing? How do we treat our employees? Who are our employees?
Yeah.
Do we actually have equity? That often in the space, Lisa, of trying to just survive.
Yeah.
And so it's been a delicate dance for a lot of companies. What have you observed in the space of DE&I and turnaround?
Well, one is we all made a commitment a year and a half ago that we were going to address this issue. So stop disappearing on me. I told
Mhm.
somebody in a meeting the other day because I deal with access to care for patients. And we've come up with, they're not sexy, but they're the policy changes and very specific structural things that have to happen. And it's going to require due diligence to make it happen. I'm like, you've been wearing your Black Lives Matter t-shirts and I'm fine with that, but you need to understand we need to fix these three things.
Right.
And if you mean it, move from hyperbole into action. Secondarily
Mhm.
is remembering that mentorship to me is a lifetime engagement. I have been utterly and completely blessed to have mentors who've been with me for my life. We are talking about giving people promotions, putting them in the spotlight, moving them into a job, and they may not have had all of the training associated with that. Neither did I. It doesn't matter whether or not you are a person of color or an individual that they have promoted. Every promotion means that you're learning something new. And so I've seen
Yes.
PepsiCo does internal mentors. And at FAIR, we copied that. We actually made a decision to mentor internally an individual with somebody that's in a different part of the organization so that
Excellent.
you always have a touch point. You always have someone helping you. And then the last thing is, let's say that you have a wonderful Black employee, and that individual is going to tap out in your organization. I tell people that when I look at somebody I want to promote, it doesn't mean that their life has to be with me and my organization. What I want to
Mm,
do is take them as far as I can in my organization. And if we don't have the ability to promote them to where they need to go to fulfill their what they're so wonderful at doing and what God put them on this earth to do, help them find the next thing. And then we all clap and celebrate. Oh my God, so and so got this amazing job at such and such a company because we helped them get there. That daisy chain of life, now that I'm older, is one that's so critically important to each and every one of us. So think outside the box when you talk about what you want to do to promote and support individuals, and recognize you need to give them the tools, you need to give them the support. You just don't let them flounder out there, whether it's a woman or a man or an individual from a different background than yours. You've got to give them support in a way that's going to empower them, and then listen to them when they're best of class at something, because that's why you promoted them. Don't throw
right.
all this other stuff on their plate that's not going to give you as the organization what you need because they have a special talent. Focus on the special talent.
Hmm. You know, this concept of turnaround, just going a little deeper on this subject, what I have witnessed, because I've been doing a lot of work with corporations, large and small, in this space, is at this point, what you alluded to at the beginning of my last question, people are tired. They don't
Mhm.
want to talk about it anymore. Like, we check this box. Why do we still have to talk about this? And what is happening in some corporations, too many in my estimation, is, oh, we hired a few people of color.
Yep.
We paid attention to the Stop Asian Hate movement because we didn't even realize that was a thing. And now we're promoting people because the freeze off of hiring, and a whole lot of white people are being promoted. Maybe more women, because the also a lot of women have stood up and said, "You didn't pay attention to me during Me Too. You need to pay attention to me now."
Mm.
But the dynamics, I'm not seeing the turnaround uh, be as equitable as it needs to be to actually make systemic change.
Absolutely, it's not. And again, I go back to the medical field. There are eh, I'm new to the medical arena, and so I was brought in to turn around FAIR Medical Research Organization. This is a new area for me. So when we started, one of the things I noticed was twofold. One is that we didn't, when we talked about voice of the patient, we didn't have Black and brown patients represented. So clinical trials were 75% white kids, and like, well,
Wow.
where's everybody else? Secondarily, as the organization did not have a diverse leadership population, and so I really actively recruited people, and I have just some amazing talent in my organization. And as I said earlier, those people know I'm going to help them no matter where they go in life. I want them to be successful because they're amazing people who can have a true impact on the world around them. But the reality is, when I started investigating the medical side, it's complex. Healthcare is complex. And we forget, we make these big sweeping remarks and these big sweeping changes. And the reality is, if a mom serves in a job that she is getting minimum wage hourly for, and she has to take her child for medical treatment, look at how many buses she has to get on. Look at how long she has to be in the doctor's office. Think about the impact of that therapy that you've designed, and whether or not she can actually take advantage of it and has the flexibility not only of her pocketbook but of her life, and then make the changes that will enable that. And you have to be very careful about how you make those changes. You're supporting all of your employees, and you're supporting the entire group of the community. But it's not sexy. I think that's one thing I keep coming back to is it's not sexy. It is methodical, it's
Yeah.
systematic, it's measurement, and it is a long-term personal commitment, because the reality is we all move ahead in life not on our own. We do it as a team. We do it with our mentors. We get pulled up the ladder. And when you get pulled up the ladder, somebody's got to be there to actually help explain to you what the next step is. And God knows I rely on people all the time and say, okay, I've never done this job before. What do I do? and having people who go, "You're right, you've never done this job before.
Mhm.
Here's the training that you need to perform on that job." Uh, we'll put people in front of the camera without giving them media training. It's like,
Right.
what are you thinking
And
of?
wonder why are they doing a poor job?
Right, exactly. Did
How
you
could that
set them
be?
up for failure?
Right. Interesting. I'm thinking about a different type of business now. I want to turn the page. Legacy businesses.
Yep.
So there are a lot of businesses that have been around for a long time that have had tremendous impact over the years, and often they get to a certain stage and they're stale.
Yeah.
They've been very small. The leadership team has been small, and there many of them are elders, which is nothing wrong with elders, but if they haven't diversified that leadership, then all they have are the people who've been there for a long time. Turnaround in legacy businesses can be so challenging. And you talk a bit about, the heartstrings that are so tied to how it was
Yeah.
that it's hard to look at where it is and where it can go. What advice would you give to legacy businesses that are struggling right now?
You've got to be willing to end on a high note and step away and let the next people come in and make the changes and don't interfere. My dad taught me, and I keep it very much in mind, that when you leave, you leave. And you shouldn't be contradicting the person. And in fact, what I do after I've turned around an organization, and I always pass my organization on to somebody who's better, smarter, can move it to a new level. Um, if the employee contacts me, I'm always happy to say, "Hey, great to hear from you. You need to go back and talk to that person." It's not my job anymore. And so don't undercut people. Be willing to pass the mantle of leadership, end on a high note, or end in a way of recognizing you put your blood, sweat, and tears into this. And it's okay to look at what it will take to make that investment you have made go to the level it needs to be. And you may not be part of that process, but the good news is 20 years from now, you're going to look back and that organization has just grown and blossomed because you planted the seeds. You just may not be the person harvesting the seeds. And so, everybody,
But
in one of the,
Lisa, I just want to say, what you've written about founder syndrome.
yeah,
There are people who, I mean, you're talking about such a selfless approach, which of course is what we all aspire to have. And I have worked with some founders who absolutely think they're the only ones who know anything, that
oh,
they
yeah.
know the best, that nobody else could possibly know more than them. And of course, that doesn't work very well. How do you change your mindset? Because I think that's a turnaround too, to change your mindset to believe, okay, I've taken it this far and it's the best thing to pass the baton.
Well, there are one of two ways. One is, and it depends on the personality, is you can have a good friend or a colleague have what I call the coming to God conversation.
Right.
The coming to God conversation is where you go, "Look, here's the deal. You've done all this stuff. Listen to me right now. If you do this, this, and this, everything that you've invested, all that you have put into this, it's going to die on the vine."
Mm,
And sometimes that's a wake up call for somebody to go, "Ooh, you're right. My pride is way too into this." That doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to have a moderated session. That's where executive coaches are great,
yes.
because you could get an executive coach who can coach you through the process. You have to be willing to put your ego aside and actually say, "How do I manage this?" and get someone to guide you in the management process. But one of the phrases I use in my book is, "We're all not Queen Elizabeth. You don't get to reign for 60 years." You just don't. And some people have questioned whether or not she should have. I don't know. I'm not British. Just read the press. But
And actually, some of these legacy businesses might even be 60 years old
they
and are
might.
languishing. So I think this is such good advice. You, what I've read in your book and what I'm hearing as I listen to you is really extracting ego out of it.
Yep.
The ego gets in the way and can be so difficult. You have an example in your book of working with the world's fairs,
Mhm.
right? And how, I'm going to say, ego gets in the way of keeping the budget tight because we have to have the biggest, greatest, most fabulous uh, uh, exhibits and entertainment, etc., even if it means that we couldn't possibly break even.
Right.
Can you talk about that experience of working with them and how you were able to change that mindset?
Sure. I mean, the World's Fair, there's a book called Devil in a White City. So if you want to learn everything about the World's Fair, it's about a serial killer in the Chicago World's Fair. But the other part of the book is actually about the economics of the World's Fair. And it has never worked. There are a wide variety of reasons I won't go into. It's been around since the Eiffel Tower, 175 years. And I was the first and the only commissioner general in the history of the fair to have operated a fair on budget and delivered it on time with no inspector general's reports, no legal action. And part of that was,
Drum roll, drum
yeah,
roll.
I was really, it's one of my proudest moments. I got
Me
accolades
too.
on the Senate floor because the senators were so
Wow.
happy. But a lot of that, as you said, was willing to put ego aside. And I think one thing that you've heard from me is, I went I work on expediency and getting the job done. So one of the stories I tell in the book is that I was sworn in, and they said, "Oh, you've got to get to Japan right away, and you've got to get yourself sworn in." I was nominated and had to get sworn in, and that requires a flag and someone who's a notary to take your oath of the Constitution. Well, I knew I had to get stuff done, and I knew I could wait for this big fancy event, but that would delay my ability to start raising the money that we desperately needed and to get things done. So I went to a Kinko's, and I because I read that they had a notary, and when I told the lady what I was doing, she was like, "Okay." She goes running in the back room, and she gets a little, a little thing that has tiny little flags on it, little plastic flags, and she puts it out, and all the people around the copiers are like, "What's going on?" So they all gather around, and I said, I do so solemnly swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic, all that good stuff. But that's how I approach life, and for me, it's about getting it done. Nothing embarrasses me more than going over budget. And I think that when you get caught up in the moment, and it's about the accolades and it's about the big fancy party, you have lost. We talked earlier about the customer. The customer for the World's Fair in Japan was twofold. One, it was our ally, the Japanese, because there are, geopolitical reasons why the United States has a relationship with Japan. It's counterbalanced to China. We're all reading about it right now. But secondarily is that the World's Fair was originally started as an economic enterprise, and then it turned into the party enterprise. But it
Right.
was an economic enterprise. It was actually a trade show. And so part of the job was to actually help create jobs. And so my customer and my number one goal was, what actions do I need to take to get people to invest in jobs in the United States? And I made the governors my partners, 19 of them, and we created thousands and thousands of jobs by getting
That's
auto manufacturer suppliers to invest. So you've got to bring yourself back to, why did someone give me this job? And people tend to forget that. You are a steward on behalf of an institution. They gave you a job and a paycheck to do something on behalf of the institution, which means on behalf of the customers of that institution, whether they are patients, a community, advocates, or individuals buying a widget.
and
That's your job.
sometimes that means you are not popular, because if you turn that around, you made it within budget, but it wasn't as sexy as they had wanted every time. So how did
We
you
made it
keep a
fun.
bit of how did you keep a bit of the sexiness in there to get them to say yes?
So we had fun. We just had fun. For example, 200 countries have what's called National Day at the World's Fair. It goes over 6 months, and you're responsible for throwing a party for everybody. And a lot of them would do these really elitist dinners where it was black tie, and you're in their pavilion and you have 9 course meal or whatever it is. And I decided that we couldn't afford it. So I looked, I'm like, well, what do the Japanese love? They love baseball. They love baseball. So we had a party in the U.S. Pavilion and brought in the USC marching band and Big Bird. It happened to be that the Big Bird was in Japan doing his own tour. I ended up being with him on television. I'm really tiny; he's really big, and we told everybody, bring your kids, bring your families. This isn't going to be an elite activity. We had peanuts, popcorn, hot dogs, and beer, and then we had water and Coca-Cola for everybody else. But We had so
So
much
you
fun.
thought way out of the box.
Yeah.
That's the point. That's how I wanted you to tell the story, because you talk about not going in with an agenda, being willing to have out of the box thinking, that really is what helps you in a turnaround. I'm curious, for you as a woman leader at for many years at the top, what are some of the challenges that you have had as a female? Because that's real,
Yeah.
especially in corporate America. And if you give an example of how you were able to turn around from something that was a challenge for you.
So there is this picture that I posted on LinkedIn and it went viral. And it is a picture of me at the age of 28, surrounded by a group of one-star generals and full bird colonels, all men. Because I was attending the National War College's Army War College National Security Seminar, something to which I've been nominated. I was 28 and I looked 12. And you can't tell on this camera, but I'm about 5 feet tall. And at that time, I weighed 95 pounds. Didn't weigh a lot when I was 28. Weigh a little bit more now. We won't talk about how much more. But the Pentagon, where I was working as a political appointee earlier, and then where I ended up serving as an advisor to the Secretary of Defense on some sexual harassment issues, was designed to hold men. So literally, my feet did not touch the floor, and I'd sit in these chairs, and the chairs were overwhelming. They were built not only for men, but for big military men.
Right.
And Craig Barrett taught me something. He was the CEO of Intel. He's my mentor, later chairman of the board. And he goes, okay, there's nothing you can do about that. So I want you to learn to speak with facts. And he taught me how to do my research before I walked into the room, hold my fire. I didn't have to talk a lot. He said, listen to what everybody is saying at the table. You've got your little talking points of the things you want to make clear, and you've got your facts. You can speak with data. And so when there's a lull in the conversation or when they're having an argument, taking that moment and popping up and saying whatever statement backed up by facts, redirecting the conversation in the room, that's a wow moment for other people that are sitting there. And so you have to do your homework. You have to be prepared. You have to speak with facts, because that's what makes people respect you. It makes people listen to you. And what I've learned in many situations since then is people underestimate me when I would walk into the room. Now I've got enough titles that they don't do that, but trust me, for a long time they did. Again, a lot because of my size. And by doing that, you watch the table go, oh, and just like Lisa said, we need to do this. And it is amazing to me how many really large men basically huddled behind my back going, well, like Lisa said, so they could blame it on me.
Beautiful.
But that's what I learned. That's what actually allowed me to have power in the room.
And so that goes right back to the point of mentoring, that it's
Mhm.
so important to align yourself with someone who you can trust and who has your back and is willing to teach you, right? How do you find a mentor if you haven't discovered one to date?
Well, you can look at it as short term and long term. Look, you're going to ask people to help you, and you'll either build a bond with that individual or it will be a moment in time. Hopefully, you'll build a bond. Sometimes you find that person in graduate school and undergraduate because it's a professor that you liked or somebody that you did a fellowship for. Sometimes, if you're a volunteer in an organization and you happen to meet someone who is on staff and you ask them if they would mentor you. Again, it's based on time. You always want to use people's time effectively. But then you find those moments. You find that individual, that group of individuals who become your go to for your entire life. And so those women who I note in the back of my book, some of them did endorsements, whether it was Ambassador Nancy Brinker, I can't even talk today. Nancy Brinker, who started Race for the Cure, she always responds to me. I don't bug her a lot, but when I send Nancy a note, because she knows she hasn't heard from me for 6 months and therefore it must be really important, she
Mhm.
responds instantly. Barbara Barrett was that person for me on many occasions. And so you find your people, and just remember, different moments in time, and people love having continuity. As we get older, right now I'm more available for this because I'm
Mhm.
getting ready to retire. And I've told the kids I'm working with, I'm like, you keep up with me because that's going to be my legacy, right? If I can help them through the next 20 years to take everything that I built and turn it into something amazing.
Beautiful. Before we go, you have worked with several presidents.
Mhm.
We please give us a little tidbit about each president that you've had the honor of working with.
Well, I mean, Ronald Reagan was my favorite. He had a beauty of speech, and his quotable quotes really make me smile. And they're things that I go back and read because he had a wonderful sense of humor. George H. W. Bush, the senior Bush, was the nicest man, and I think people got to know that after he left office, as he was actually a very humble man, and he wrote thank you notes. And so one thing I have done is I have always written handwritten thank you notes to people because I saw that was something that he did and was very careful about. Bill Clinton remembers everybody's name. I'm
He
always
really
stunned. You
does.
go to an event and you're like in this room with 100 people, and he goes, "Oh, Susie, don't you remember what we did here?" And it's stunning. So he remembers people's names. And then George W. Bush, he has a great sense of humor, and he remembered names too. There's a reason why his father adopted Bill Clinton, because the reality is Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, they have a lot in common. They're both people who remember your names. They have a funny sense of humor. They're just down to earth. They like to talk. I did not work with President Obama, but I had the opportunity to work with First Lady Michelle Obama, and quite extensively. Didn't really know her that well, but just so admired her using her platform in a fun and engaging way to talk about a very difficult issue, which was the problem of obesity, and the
Yes.
manner in which she provided a mechanism that we could all rally around and then provide solutions and results for was truly a testament, and it had a great impact. So it's been my
What a
honor, my
journey.
pleasure. Yeah, it's been
What
great.
an incredible journey. Okay, everybody, Lisa Gable's book is Turnaround: How to Change Course When Things Are Going South. And I want to tell you, it's very easy to read and to follow. I love the storytelling, Lisa, because you say what to do in very simple words, and then you describe how you've done it, how others have done it. And I think examples really help people to be
Yeah.
empowered. So we appreciate you and your book. Thank you so much for being with me today, and congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really great.
Wonderful. Hey, everybody, that was a special edition of Dream Leapers with Lisa Gable. You need to go out and read her book, get her book now. I also want to remind you that on October 16th, I will be hosting the first ever Dream Leapers virtual retreat, What's Next? And you can join for free thanks to our friends at Toyota and Google. You can sign up, go to my website, dreamleapers.com, and you can sign up right there. We have tons of speakers. This incredible speaker is just, giving you a little taste of what we are going to have to help you figure out what's next for your life, whether it's business, family, health. We have people who will support you. So until next time, have a great day and make it count.